Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me out there? I want to thank you for being here with us today to talk about housing. And I know many of you were going to come here. It's a vote that we're taking today. And to take time out from your schedules to be with us is very important, and I thank you. And so I thank you all for joining me today. In addition to being joined by members of Congress, I'm also joined by representatives from housing advocacy groups. We're here today to highlight the importance of housing in the President's Build Back Better agenda. Housing is infrastructure. For decades now, our country has been in a housing crisis. There is a shortage of nearly 7 million rental homes that are affordable and available to America's lowest income renters. There's a $70 billion backlog in capital repairs needed to ensure public housing residents are living in safe and decent conditions. Millions of affordable housing units nationwide lack the green upgrades needed to make them climate resilient and energy efficient. Only 1 in 5 families who are eligible for housing assistance actually receives it. From New York to West Virginia to Arizona to California, people are hurting. Housing prices continue to rise, and millions of families now pay more than 50% of their income on rent. For decades, we've put off making the investments needed to change these disturbing statistics. And just like a bridge that crumbles without maintenance, our housing safety net is at its breaking point. So housing is infrastructure. Housing is also racial equity. Housing is climate resilience. Housing is child care and elder care. And housing grows the middle class. These are facts. Another sad fact is that if we don't expand our housing programs in this budget reconciliation bill, we never will. The political will is only there for less funding, not more. The same people who are trying to block housing funds now will absolutely block these same funds if we try to get them later. Last month, I led the Democrats on the Financial Services Committee in passing a historic $327 billion bill for our nation's housing programs. This package would provide 750,000 housing choice vouchers, providing housing for up to 1.7 million people, create or rehabilitate over 3 million affordable housing units, expand for housing enforcement, and provide down payment assistance to first-generation home buyers. All of this funding is now at risk of being reconciliation entirely. So this is it. This is our chance. This is our once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally invest in our housing programs, our communities, and our future, an investment that is long overdue. Last week, my committee members sent a strong letter to Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, and President Biden to make the case for the need for this funding. But I'm not stopping there. I will continue to push for housing and fight to ensure that the administration understands that housing is infrastructure and should not be left on the cutting floor. Now, I would like to introduce the chair of the Housing, Community Development, and Insurance Committee, Mr. Cleaver, for his remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the great things that has happened, from my perspective, is Maxine Waters becoming chair of the Financial Services Committee, and I eventually would come under her leadership reign as chair of the Housing Subcommittee. Hopefully, if you understand that 6 people lived in this house at one time, I was one of them, my mother, father, 3 sisters, and me. You'll understand why I'm so happy that we have a general providing us with leadership. For those of you who have read or studied The Art of War, you probably know that Sun Tzu says a lot of profound things. One of them is All political struggles are based on deception. When it appears that there are no options, you produce one. And that's what has happened here. People all over the country have become concerned about affordable housing. Nothing was being done moving into the arena of combating this grave problem. But our general came up with one, and when we started talking about Build Back Better and that we were talking about human infrastructure, we come up with a response. And that response can help redirect this country. Housing is a problem. I'm an expert on what happens when you can get affordable housing. When we moved out of the shack that we lived in into public housing, and then my father saved money. He had to lie. He had to lie to the public housing authority because he got a second job. And if he had gotten a second job, it meant that his income would force us to have to pay more money for public housing. He lied until he could save enough money for us to move into a house that he just moved out of last week, and on July 16th he became 100 years old. And so I am absolutely convinced that lives can be changed if we have housing for them. Right now, the most powerful nation on the planet has almost 600,000 people without housing tonight in the United States of America. And so I am pleased that we are standing fast on affordable housing. And I want to thank, again, General Waters.
Thank you, thank you. Next we will have Representative Al Green from Texas. Representative Green.
Thank you ever so much. It's a preeminent privilege for me to serve under the leadership of the Honorable Maxine Waters in the Congress of the United States of America. Yes, housing is infrastructure, but I'd like to talk about infrastructure being housing. The empirical evidence of what I speak of is intuitively obvious to even the most casual observer as you just traverse the large cities in this country. You see people outside of my congressional office in Houston, Texas, who have made their home under an overpass along the freeway. Tents under overpasses. That's if they are fortunate enough to have a tent, because in many places they don't have a tent. They just have the overpass. Infrastructure has become housing in the richest country in the world. That's got to change. This legislation can allow this change to take place, and it is a necessary change. If infrastructure can become housing, and it is, then housing can be infrastructure. Yes. It's time for us to turn the tables. It's time for us to get people from under the bridges, the overpasses, along the highways and byways of life in this country. We have a unique opportunity. This is a seminal moment in time, and I'm so grateful that the Honorable Maxine Waters had the courage to take a stand for those who are among the least, the last, and the lost, who cannot help themselves. But for her leadership, I don't know that we'd be having this press conference today. So I thank you. Finally, it said that home is where the heart is. Then where is the heart of the homeless? On the bridges, overpasses, and in tents along the road. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next from New York, we have Representative Nydia Velazquez.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairwoman Waters, not only for your leadership on this issue, but for being such an extraordinary chairwoman who listens to all the members' needs. So I'm really grateful to you. My friends, we are facing an affordability crisis in this country. An affordability when it comes to crisis, when it comes to child care, when it comes to access to health care, when it comes to housing. It doesn't matter how hard people are working, 2, 3 jobs, and yet they cannot make ends meet. And that is not who we are. Here we are at this moment to address once and for all the disinvestment, the federal disinvestment that has taken place for almost 3 decades when it comes to housing in this country. So this investment of $300 billion in funding for new and existing federal housing programs across the board, it is a generational, transformational investment. I am proud that it includes funding for a project close to my heart and one that I've been fighting to fund for years. This is $80 billion for HUD's Public Housing Capital Fund, enough to finally eliminate the entire capital repair backlog for NYCHA and all the public housing authorities nationwide. In public housing buildings from the Lower East Side to Williamsburg in my district, too many residents have been waiting for years for proper heat and other necessities. Their apartments have been plagued with mold and lead, all because of decades of federal disinvestment. In the wealthiest nation on earth, no one should be living in conditions like this. This is a pivotal moment in our history. We finally have a chance to make the investment that will help working families achieve the American dream. We cannot back down, and that is why I am proud to be here today and will continue to do everything in my power to fight for the Build Back Better Act. I would now like to, the chairwoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you. From Georgia,
She's in charge.
We now have Representative Nakima Williams. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Chairwoman Waters, for your leadership and convening this very timely and critical conversation as we continue to discuss the Build Back Better Act and reaffirm that housing is, in fact, infrastructure. I represent Georgia District, home to Atlanta, which has one of the least equitable housing markets anywhere in this country. A recently released report showed that the average home price in Atlanta in July was more than 20% higher than it was just July of 2020. That's 1 year, y'all, a 20% increase. Increases like this make home ownership unattainable for many families, and unfortunately our number of affordable and available housing units is well below the national average. I've seen firsthand how the programs that we're fighting to include in the Build Back Better Act will improve people's lives every day. I toured the new Herndon Square facility just last week with Atlanta seniors, where I was lucky enough to meet 2 residents, Ms. Juanita Wallace and Ms. Lavonia Morgan, who welcomed me and HUD Secretary Marsha Fudge into their homes. Ms. Wallace and Ms. Morgan couldn't believe how lucky they were to have affordable housing that was within walking distance of a MARTA station for quick access to mass transit and green space at the brand new Peace Park. Smart developments like Herndon Square built in desirable locations are crucial, not just for seniors like Ms. Morgan and Ms. Wallace, but for everyone who needs and deserves affordable housing in this country. Everyone should have access to a home where they are happy, can get to work easily, and know that their children will be safe when they play in their front yards. Growing up, y'all, my family didn't have much, but the one thing that we always had was a roof over our heads. And I want the same assurance for every family that I serve. That's why I'll never waver from my commitment to secure the resources that we need to ensure affordable housing is available to everyone, no matter your zip code. I'm glad that I'm not doing this work alone. I'm proud to stand here today with Chairwoman Waters and my House Democratic colleagues because there are too many people looking to Congress for help, and they need housing, and we are not going to let them down. And now I'm going to turn it back to Chairwoman Waters for our next speaker.
Thank you. Next from Texas, we have Representative Sylvia Garcia.
Thank you, Chairwoman Waters, and to all my colleagues, thank you for being here on this very critical issue. You know, I have some what I call fancy words that my staff put together, but I'm going to try to keep it simple. Growing up, I heard often, mi casa, su casa. Mi casa, su casa. How many of y'all heard that? Most of y'all have. You know what it means, right? My house, your house. My house, your house. Well, the truth is, you got to have a house
to share it with everybody else. And if you don't have it, then you got to rent. And if you can't afford the rent, then you may go to a public housing project. But if the public housing project is full, you may have to go get a voucher. Because everybody wants to be able to tell everybody, mi casa, su casa. But if you don't have a casa, then you can't share. I mean, there is a pride involved in owning a home and being able to say that this is your house, that you can welcome friends and visitors and relatives. Some relatives just show up without you inviting them, but you want to be able to have that casa to open up to them. So this is what this is all about. It's making sure that people have a roof over their head, and that hopefully, too, that they have food on the table and that they can take care of their families. And we have to make sure that that is available to everyone, that we have the housing infrastructure so that everyone can say, mi casa, su casa, with pride. I know that in Houston, and I know my colleague spoke before I did earlier, we have a housing shortage. Buy homes, much less people who want to rent homes, and people that are on waiting lists for vouchers, waiting lists for public housing. There's a lack of housing stock. There's a lack of housing infrastructure. People cannot keep up. So this whole proposal that Chairwoman Waters has put into the Build Back Better plan is to ensure that every American can reach that dream of owning a home or being able to have a roof over their head, whether through rent or subsidy or a voucher. And it's important for them to be able to say, mi casa, su casa. With that, I yield back.
Thank you so very much. Next, from Nevada, we have Representative Horsford.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Waters. It's great to be here with you under your leadership and all of my colleagues who are pressing the issue of housing as part of our infrastructure and Build Back Better. I'm Stephen Horsford. I represent Nevada's 4th District, which includes Las Vegas and also 6 rural counties covering 52,000 square miles. Now, in Las Vegas, where I was born and raised, we are the entertainment capital of the world, and we are known as the city with shining lights along the Las Vegas Strip. Well, I represent the part of Las Vegas where people live, where people are struggling right now to afford to live. And if you ever come to Las Vegas and you go to the top of the stratosphere and you look across the valley, there's bright lights virtually everywhere but in Nevada's 4th District, where I represent, where in over the last year, rent prices rose 20%, even as our unemployment rose to the highest in the nation. Today, thousands of mothers and fathers are still terrified that they may lose the roof over their child's head in the middle of a deadly pandemic. I personally know the pain and trauma that comes from being evicted and losing your home. We cannot let that happen to our children in the richest country on earth. Americans are counting on us to make big, bold investments in housing to build back better. And this is our moment to deliver. So I fully support the work of Chairwoman Waters and her committee and the House Financial Services housing provisions in the Build Back Better Act. I'm now on the Ways and Means Committee, but I am fighting for these investments, $90 billion for new rental assistance targeted to low-income renters, $80 billion to address public housing capital backlog, $80 billion in housing supply investments, including the National Housing Trust Fund, the Home Program, capital magnet funds, $8.5 billion for CDBG funding targeted to manufactured housing communities, and $10 billion for first-time, first-generation home buyers so that we can address the racial inequities in home buying that have plagued and disproportionately impacted communities of color. So I stand with you, Chairwoman Waters, and my colleagues, and I will work with you to make sure that we get this Build Back Better Act passed with key investments for housing for all of our families that does not leave anyone or any community behind. Thank you. I yield back.
Next, we have Representative Sheila from Texas also. Thank you.
Congressman Waters, for someone coming from a state like Texas, I'm taking off my mask to speak about this issue. You know, we're a hot spot, and I thank you for being a hot spot on housing. Let me thank you for the courtesies extended to me, to my colleagues that are here from Nevada and Georgia twice, Texas twice, and California. I don't know if people have seen the video or experienced in their own districts the thousands that were evicted during this pandemic. We had a story that went viral as a father came out with a stroller. A wife was behind him with 3 children, and he was unceremoniously evicted by law enforcement in our community. When I say law enforcement, that is one of their duties, to evict persons. When I went to an apartment complex and a senior citizen was standing outside crying because she had gotten a notice she had to get out. And then the many families, young families, that are coming up and looking to live in neighborhoods that should be restored. If I might say, in this instance, the districts that Congresswoman Garcia, Green, and Jackson Lee have are contiguous districts, separate, but with families who are desperately in need. In Houston, the richest, one of the richest states in the nation, and as well a state that has garnered enough population to have districts, of course, to give to someone else and not the people who need them. But what Chairwoman Waters has consistently done is made the point that hashtag infrastructure is housing or hashtag housing is infrastructure. She's made it eloquently. It is true. You know, you remember the names Calabrini, the Calabrini housing, and you remember them in Chicago and Atlanta. Cabrini Green. Thank you. I've got some other terminology, but the heart is good. I was here, she was here, when they had the attitude, let's get rid of public housing. You could have done something with it. It could have been beautified. That's what I did in my congressional district. I put flowers out, and we worked together. Well, what that did is it cut down the opportunity for young families to get a start. It wasn't a cycle of poverty. Doctors, lawyers, presidents, and others came out of the housing development, from Atlanta to New York to Chicago to Houston. We now understand that we denied children their place to do their homework. We denied them broadband. We put them in parking lots. So I come today to ensure that we maintain housing in all of the bills, the Invest Act and the Build Back Better Act. We must continue to keep all the elements in, because any element taken out, housing taken out, you are hurting families. And the numbers are high. The census across the nation has shown the growth is young. It is minority of people who are in need. So I simply wanted to come today to be able to say, in the aftermath of the pandemic, when people were literally put on the streets with all of their belongings, I'm standing by the great work that has already been done that says that housing is there for the homeless, the unhoused, children, seniors, diverse populations, and yes, the new Afghan refugees who are in my district looking for housing, and yes, the Haitian refugees, those who came from the Northern Triangle to work and to do the nation's business. I'm going to stand with them. Thank you.
Also from Georgia, we have Hank Johnson, who is coming with us. Great words of support.
Thank you, Chairwoman Waters. I'm Congressman Hank Johnson, representing Georgia's 4th Congressional District. And I know I don't look like it, ladies and gentlemen, but I turned 67 years old a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. And never before in my 67 years of living have I seen a homelessness problem like we have today in this country. So many working people who don't have a place to go after they toil for 60 2 jobs or 3 jobs sometimes, full-time and a part-time job, trying to make ends meet and still not able to afford housing, basic necessity of living in this country. And I just saw a report that despite the economic meltdown of the pandemic, that this nation still collected an excess of about $600+ billion in revenue. And so with that much money coming in, despite a pandemic, and with the drawdown in the war in Afghanistan, that has to count for something. I mean, you know, there's money that is there, and when you're asking the rich to pay their fair share of the tax burden, the money is there. And so it's just a matter of the will to do what's right, to fill the need. Housing is an essential need. Affordable housing is lacking in this country, and I'm so happy that Congresswoman Waters and the Financial Services Committee have stepped forward with a plan to meet that challenge, to afford affordable housing to people who need it. And so when we talk about what's going to be in or what's not going to be in the Build Back Better infrastructure bills, housing certainly needs to be in it. And it needs to be in it in a big, fundamental way. And I'm here to demonstrate and express my support for that value that is so driven by this chairwoman. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have representatives from many of our housing advocates who are here today. They have worked hard. They have lobbied. They have done everything that you could possibly do to help educate and identify this need. And so I'm going to ask Sarah Sadian from the National Low Income Housing Coalition to please come forward. And for all of our housing advocates, come forward. Come forward. Come forward here. Come forward with us. Come on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Chairwoman Waters for holding this press event and for her incredible leadership on housing, not just on this bill, but for a lifetime. We know that affordable housing is central to the lives of millions of families who are struggling to pay rent and put food on the table, meet their other basic needs. 500,000 people every year, any given night are experiencing homelessness. Are one paycheck away, one financial shock, one broken down car, a couple days missed at work from falling behind on their rent, facing eviction, and possibly facing homelessness. The $327 billion included in the House bill would go a long way to addressing the underlying causes of our housing crisis. It addresses the gap between wages and housing costs by expanding rental assistance by $90 billion to serve another 1 million households. The bill also addresses the severe shortage of housing for households with the very lowest incomes by building more supply through the National Housing Trust Fund and other programs that will help alleviate the housing crisis for those households and also reduce rent pressure on households that make relatively higher incomes. There's a lot of resources in these bills that are so important to us, public housing dollars that go to address severe housing conditions that people are forced to live in. They have to choose between whether or not to afford their housing or condition. That's not fair to put any household in that position, and this bill addresses that too. And at the end of the day, we know what is at stake. These resources on the table today in the bill could end homelessness in America, but only if we're doing it right and only if the final bill includes these resources. And so we are here to stand with the chairwoman and everyone else who's here today to make sure that any final package includes these resources, because we know how central it is to the families that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just say that The members of the Financial Services Committee have worked very hard in their respective districts on this issue. And I come from a huge family. There were 13 kids in my family, and I can't even tell you what we went through to try to have decent housing. And it goes back. We didn't even have indoor toilets. We didn't have running water. It goes back to a time when the pipes on the inside of the house would freeze in St. Louis, Missouri, and we had to build a fire up under those pipes in order to get the water running. Nydia Velazquez called me from New York. She was at a public housing development that had no heat. When I'm in Texas with my family and my husband's family, I'm in Fifth Ward. I see what has been going on there for years. Whether I'm in Nevada, and Congressman Horsford is absolutely correct. You go, on the main drag there, and you think this is Las Vegas. I want to tell you, you get off the main drag, and you can see what's needed. So whether we're talking about Georgia, Nevada, New York, Texas, etc., housing is needed all over this country, in urban areas and in rural areas, and we intend to fight for it. And I want you to know I've had two slight conversations with the President of the United States, who promised me that he would be supportive of housing. And so we're going to hold him to that. And we know that negotiations are still going on, and we don't intend to be cut out. We don't intend to be treated unfairly. We intend to be a part of those negotiations. And if, in fact, our friends on the Senate side does not step up to the plate in the way that they should, and we have to take some cuts, it must be fair. That we are not going to let housing be off the agenda. With that, we'll take some questions, and you may direct them to anyone here. Let me start here, and then I'll be there. I can't hear you. No, and absolutely, I don't really negotiate that way. Starting publicly to say what should be, what shouldn't be, what we'd take. We believe that we're fighting for my package now, and if there are to be cuts, those people who've worked so hard for it will get together and we'll make decisions about it, where we think there could be some reductions. Yes, ma'am. I like the idea of that possibility, that perhaps rather than looking at a 10-year allocation, that it could be something smaller which would reduce the amount of the overall package. I like the idea. Yes, sir. I can't hear you.
There's a lot of proposals in the package that address racial inequities, whether it's housing or healthcare or education. And with the top line, it's only lower. I mean, are you concerned at all that they're not be able to, make as much progress on racial justice?
Well, let me just say that one of the things that I like about this president and this administration is he's talked about equity, and he's talked about making up for some of the wrongs of our society. And housing is one area where there has been discrimination, where we've been relegated to areas where, they pile up all of the poor people without all of the resources that are necessary to have decent housing. And so I see this as the greatest way to demonstrate that you really care about equity and that you're prepared to do what is necessary. And as I hear more than once today, this is once in a lifetime opportunity, and we must take advantage of it now. And so, if we are to correct the wrongs of the past, housing is one way to do it. Yes, sir. Okay, and I think I heard most of what you said, but let me just say this. when you have affordable housing and people have decent places to live, and you're not forced to live in situations where people are, piled upon each other, families, are living in, small units, 3, 4, 5, 6 families to a unit. Those kinds of situations create tension, and it creates the opportunity for things to happen. And so I do believe that investment in affordable, decent housing benefits everybody. And I want you to know that in this package we have the Housing Trust Fund. And remember Barney Frank and we worked on this a long time ago. It has never been funded. Now is the time to live up to the promise of the National Housing Trust Fund and present and support those units that are so necessary to deal with this crisis that we have in the country. Anybody can join in on this if you'd like. Yes. Yes, please.
Which provisions in the housing funding are most under threat at this point?
I beg your pardon?
Which provisions in the housing funding do you think are most under threat at this point?
Well, all of it is under threat. As you heard defined here today, public housing is in great disrepair. People are living in public housing units all over this country. As I said, Nydia Velazquez was at one where she called me last winter where it had no heat. You've heard about the elevators don't work. You've heard about the lack of maintenance. You've heard about the fact that we still, are dealing with, the kinds of problems, health problems in these public housing units where the children are still exposed to lead paint and all of that. So that's very important. We talk about having Section 8 vouchers. We have people who have been waiting for vouchers for 10 years, just hoping to get a voucher so that they can go and look for a place. Some people will say, well, if you have all of those vouchers, you don't have enough places. Well, we have a housing trust fund. And we're talking about building affordable housing. We can't do this on the cheap. We've got to build affordable housing. And that's what that Housing Trust Fund is all about. And so we want to have the vouchers, and we have the project-based vouchers where we're saying to developers, come and build affordable housing. And with that voucher program that we have, it can be project-based so that they could build this affordable housing. We even have in this program assistance for down payments for first generations. And I want to tell you, this includes millennials. This includes those who have never even dreamed that they would be able to save up enough money for a down payment. We have people who work every day, who work jobs, and they can afford a mortgage, but they can't afford the down payment. And so I think this idea of first generation assisting them with with money for the down payment is extraordinarily important. Open up these opportunities. It's time, and we can do that with housing. Okay, would my members like to help close with any other insights you may have? You feel welcome to do so. And if there are no more questions, we will just close by saying,
housing is infrastructure.
I want to hear it. Housing is infrastructure. Housing is infrastructure. And again, I want to thank you all so very much for coming out today. I want to thank the members, both from the committee and those who don't serve on the committee, for understanding that we have to work hard and we have to fight and we have to ensure that housing is taken seriously. We don't intend to just go away. We're nobody's victim. And Barbara Lee has shown up, so we're going to let Barbara Lee say something. Come, Barbara. Housing is infrastructure.
No, I'm down. Housing is, listen, I'm from Oakland and Berkeley, California. The unsheltered population, and housing is the biggest. And housing is a basic human right, and we should not in America have one unhoused person. I want to thank Congresswoman Maxine Waters and all who are fighting to make sure it was $350 billion, right, in the Build Back Better bill.
Yeah, but it's
going down now.
Yeah.
So, but we've got to fight to get as much as we can in it, because people deserve a decent, affordable place to live, to raise their families that's safe,
and that allows them to live the American dream. So just
thank you
so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Landed,
Thank you.
So I'm really
And
happy
for our
to be here.
advocates who changed all of their schedules today to be here and made sacrifices, are you in this fight? Should we keep up this fight? Should we deal with every level of government that may have some different ideas about housing? Okay, I said so. Listen, you can see how fired up we are. Thank you all so very, very much. And I want to thank the staff for the work. I didn't believe that you could get this done. I didn't believe that you could have these people out here. And I just asked all of you earlier today whether or not we made a mistake. And maybe we pushed too hard. But look what happened. And I want to say to you all, you did a great job. Thank you so very much. On to the debt limits, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.